My name is James Hein, and I live in Woodward, Oklahoma. I have a story to tell about the time that I was a super soldier. And it started out when I was a sophomore in high school. I'd heard from another guy that I went to school with from my class that there was boxing, and he told me where it was at. And I'd always enjoyed watching anything that had to do with fighting. Loved it. So I thought, well, I'm going to join boxing and try that out. And so I joined. Well, it didn't take me too long after that before I got what's known in the fighting community as fighter's eyes. Now, fighter's eyes is kind of funny. Your eyelids kind of change the way they look, and your eyes look different. And after I developed them, my coach's assistant told my coach in my presence right after I had gotten done sparring with my sparring partner, the guy that had initially told me that boxing was in town, and that guy ended up being my sparring partner for the whole 2 years that I was in boxing. I was in boxing from my junior year into my sophomore year until my senior year. But anyway, going back to where I was at just a minute ago, on my way out of the ring from after sparring, within the first, month or two of me being in boxing, the coach's assistant said that I had fighter's eyes. And I asked Coach what fighter's eyes were, and he just told me that fighter's eyes were eyes that fighters get. That's all he said about them. I didn't know anything about fighter's eyes until many years later. What I learned about fighter's eyes many years later was that when you have fighter's eyes, you lose your memory of what's going on at the time. So when you get fighter's eyes, you have a very short memory span, or at least I did. My memory span was about 5 minutes long. You could tell me to remember a number and get me to talking about something else, and then 5 minutes later, tell me to tell you the number that you had me remember. And not only wouldn't I remember the number, but I wouldn't even remember that you told me to remember it. I had no memory. And then when you get rid of fighter's eyes, you have no memory of anything that just occurred while you had fighter's eyes, or that you even had fighter's eyes. I didn't know that until many years later. Another thing with fighter's eyes is that later on in life, around the age of 27 for me, I was 27 when this happened, is that memories start pouring back into your mind of times that you had fighter's eyes, of things that happened while you had fighter's eyes. And that is where this super soldier story comes from, is from recovered memories. Call them repressed memories if you'd like, but memories that I didn't receive until many years after they occurred. And it took me many years of studying the memories and what was in them to really understand what it was that I had went through and been a part of. Another thing about fighter's eyes that would have saved me a lot of trouble is that when you have fighter's eyes, if you have sex while you have fighter's eyes, you cause your fighter's eyes to last longer. So the more sex you have, the longer your eyes last. So you can literally go out, if you have those eyes and you never stop having sex, I guess you could literally have those eyes forever. It's kind of like there was an old movie there was an old movie that come out in the early aughts, I believe it was, called Memento. It was about a guy who had lost his short-term memory, and he was trying to find out who it was that killed his wife, and in investigating it without any kind of memory. He would write himself notes all the time, all over the place, and try to make sense out of the notes that he was leaving to understand what he was going on, and the information that he was uncovering about his wife's murder. It is kind of a messed up movie, but ultimately that's kind of the way that I was living. If you want to get an example of how I was living, look that movie up on Netflix. But a couple of times in my life, I went out of it with fighter's eyes for an indeterminate amount of time, weeks, possibly months. I really don't know how long I was out of it with fighter's eyes. Probably weeks at a time, a couple of weeks at a time. But anyway, how this super soldier stuff all got started was my senior year in high school. I was in a chemistry class. The teacher was a military guy who'd been in the military for 10 years. And I was trying to get I was sitting in the front row, at the very front of the class. Our desks were in columns, and my sparring partner was directly to the left of me in the column. Behind him, a couple of seats, was another guy that I didn't particularly like, and I told him where boxing was to try to get him to go to boxing class, so I could knock him around a little bit, because I just didn't like the guy. And anyway, it was petty and stupid, but teenagers do petty and stupid things all the time. So, and what I didn't know at the time is that he was working with the chemistry teacher and learning military stuff, because he was wanting to pursue a career in the military after he got out of high school. Well, I didn't know that. So he asked me, this kid that I was trying to get to go to boxing asked me who was badder, fighters or military guys. I told him, I said, I really don't know anything about the military, so I really don't know. He said, well, if you had to guess, who would you guess? And I said, fighters. That pissed off the chemistry teacher, and he gave me fighter's eyes accidentally. My sparring partner already had fighter's eyes, and he tried to get me and my sparring partner to fight in the middle of class. My sparring partner went up to the front of the room, and I sat in my seat. I literally wanted to fight so bad I couldn't move, and that happens to fighters. They can literally want to fight so bad that they lose all ability to move any part of their body. So anyway, I just sat there and kind of ended up waiting it out as my sparring partner was standing there. Finally, he realized I wasn't coming up there, and I didn't go up there not because I was scared or anything. I just literally wanted to fight so bad I couldn't move. So he went and sat back down, and the chemistry teacher come at my throat like this, and I was looking in his eyes as he was coming at me, and his eyes were doing something his pupils were doing something I'd never seen before. They were glowing gold. I'd never seen it happen before, and I've seen it happen one other time, and with normal eyes. It was a flash of gold. It wasn't glowing gold, but it was a flash of gold. I came to understand what that was later on in life, But I'll leave that for another video. This is about the super soldier stuff. So anyway, it made him mad, and the chemistry teacher, and the student that I was trying to get to go to boxing told him where boxing was at, which was being held at the National Guard Armory. Well, the next boxing class, here comes the chemistry teacher, and on his way in, the first thing he said he yelled out was to the coach, while me and my sparring partner was in the ring sparring, was that coach had no right to be there. Coach called in his assistant to referee the match of me and my sparring partner sparring, and soon as his assistant got in the ring, coach got out of the ring and started walking out of the ring and yelled back, 20 years in the military, I earned the right to be here. Well, the chemistry teacher told coach, yelled back to coach that if he was going to be there, he should pay rent. That caused coach to start charging his fighters for lessons, because up to that point, he didn't charge us for any lessons. So I couldn't afford lessons, so I got a job. I quit boxing and got a job to afford lessons. But by the time I got a job and was working, I was working like 40 hours a week plus going to high school. I flat didn't have time to mess with it, so I never went back. But anyway, as I turned 18 my senior year, and I didn't know it. I thought I was 17. My mom, very early on in my life, lied to me about my age. When your mom says you're this many and you're really this many, you don't question it. So I never really did the math until I got my memories back years later. But I was a year behind the rest of the students, or at least I was a year older than the rest of the students, not because I'd been held back. I spent most of my life actually in the gifted classes. I was in what they called GATES, which is gifted and talented enrichment studies. I was in accelerated English or advanced accelerated English, accelerated math, and then they put me in advanced math. So anyway, I was in all the smart people's classes. But the reason why I was a year older than all the rest of the students was because my birthday falls in November, and you have to be 5 years old to enter kindergarten, and school enrolls in August. So when school enrolled the year that I turned 5, I didn't turn 5 until after the enrollment period for that year. So I had to wait till the following year to enroll in kindergarten. So I was, when I enrolled in kindergarten, I was just, a few months away from my 6th birthday. But I didn't know, and my mom lied to me about my age that early on. Why she did it, I don't know. She passed away years ago. So why she lied to me about my age, I don't know. Maybe she didn't want me to feel weird being older than the rest of the kids. I don't know. But anyway, when I was in my senior year in high school, evidently somebody done the math. It wasn't me, but somebody had done the math. Because of what I did, it made a lot of people mad. It made my chemistry teacher mad. It made my boxing coach mad. And I had another teacher. My chemistry teacher's name was Kevin Dixon. My boxing coach's name was Ray Johnson. Kevin Dixon is a resident of Woodward, Oklahoma. He lives on a little housing addition just outside of town called 8th Street Estates. And Ray Johnson lives in a smaller town, a little ways, about 10 or 15 miles away from this town, called Shattuck, Oklahoma. That's who those two people were. And my boxing coach was 20-year military at the time, and my chemistry teacher was 10-year military at the time. Well, one or both of them went to another teacher of mine, a woman named Sandy Washman. She was my English teacher my senior year in high school. Well, she had a reputation going back many years of sleeping with her students, and of course I didn't believe it until many years later. But anyway, one or both of them went to Sandy Washman. Now, one time I had to see her after class because I didn't turn in an assignment. And she told me after class that her husband was 30-year military. So between those three, Sandy Washman's husband, and she grew up a military brat, between Sandy Washman's husband and Sandy Washman and her husband are now dead. Kevin Dixon and Ray Johnson are still alive. But between Sandy Washman, her husband, Kevin Dixon, and my boxing coach, I ended up with fighter's eyes all the time and under mind control. While I was being mind controlled, I was also being trained. There was a group of 4 people that started training me outside of class. One of them's name, I don't know one of them's name is Saunnie Thompson. She goes by Saunnie Thompson. She was, for many years, the jail administrator here in Woodward, Oklahoma. Anyhow, years later, after I got my memories back, I caught her in the parking lot of a grocery store called United and asked her about what she remembered when I had fighter's eyes. And she told me she remembered a bunch of girls hovering around her desk and that I was docile when I had fighter's eyes. And that becomes relevant later on in the story. But that was a confirmation of something that I had in one of my memories that I'll tell you about later on. But these 4 people, Saunnie Thompson, somebody that she identified to me on the phone a few years ago as possibly being a Brian Randolph, and he used to anyway, a couple of years ago. He seems to move around and changes jobs a lot. He's hard to track down. He was hard to track down, but as of a couple of years ago, he was working security at the Enid, Oklahoma County courthouse. So these are the people that I know that was involved in this. Now, Saunnie Thompson, possibly Brian Randolph, and 2 others were the ones that were training me while I was under mind control. Kevin Dixon was the one that was doing the mind control, and my boxing coach, I guess, was just along for the ride. I don't know what his role was. But anyway, and when I say training me, they were, like, for instance, one of the memories I have of their training was where they was standing side by side in a line. And because my grandpa was Air Force, he had taught me when I was very young military kill techniques with your hands that they don't teach people in the military anymore. The way he told me is, the reason why he told me that they don't teach them anymore is because they're effective and they're easy to copy, and people were out using them. So they don't teach these techniques anymore, but they had me use these techniques on them. They lined up in a line side by side, and they had me go down the line spinning from one to the next using one of the kill techniques that I knew against them. And spinning is very important. I was trained to spin a lot in fights, and that becomes significant later. Anyway, not only did they teach me that, they taught me how to use my feet, which they taught me old Special Forces fighting techniques, how to use my feet. And this is old Special Forces technique. This is old Special Forces. See, in the year 2000, when they sent me into the military, it was a conversion point for Special Forces, Green Berets, from learning Taekwondo to learning line, Marine line. The Marines had been learning line since the 1980s. And I guess they wanted to turn the Army into the Marines, I guess. So that's what they started doing. They started teaching Green Berets how to fight like Marines. And as I was being sent into the military, they trained me how to use my feet with Special Forces Taekwondo. Taekwondo is a really foot-centric martial art. Most of it is a lot of kicking. And so they taught me how to use my feet. They also taught me Marine line. I say taught me. They didn't teach me anything. They programmed it into me. And by programming, I mean in a fight, I would do something without knowing that I knew how to do it. A situation would arise, and I would use a technique that they had programmed me with in that particular situation, and I wouldn't know that I knew how to do it. It would just happen. So anyway, these 4 people trained me in line and Taekwondo and whatever it is that they did. I was immediately after that sent to someplace, and I asked somebody where I was at, and they said that I was at Ranger Indoctrination Program. And they said that I was only there because I knew somebody, and I said, well, I don't know anybody. They said, well, then somebody knows you. What I remember from while I was there was a little bit of the stuff that I did. First of all, one of the things that I remember doing is something called the pit. They had a group of about 10 or 12 of us on this log, and we was lifting this log in this sand pit or dirt pit from one shoulder to the next, over and over and over again. And as we was doing this, there was somebody standing in front of us, telling us how worthless we were, basically. And all I remember is that the longer that went on, the more pissed off I got. So I got pissed off enough to the point where I came off the log and started walking to the guy that was doing the yelling at us and everything. And one of the other guys told me to let it go, but I didn't. I walked straight up to him and punched him right in the nose, and he went down. Some other guy come over and started running his mouth, and I was already pissed, and he just pissed me off even more. And I unloaded on him. I hit him in the jaw and made him fly about 15 or 20 feet before he hit the ground. You got to understand, at this time when I had fighter's eyes, and I couldn't ever hit anybody this hard without fighter's eyes, but when I had fighter's eyes, I could literally hit a guy so hard in the jaw that they would fly off both feet like 15 or 20 feet before they'd hit the ground. Well, I did that to this guy after hitting that other guy in the nose, and I really strongly held back on him a lot when I hit him in the nose. But the other guy, when he walked up, I didn't hold back on him. So another guy at that point that was on the log said, I can see why he's here. And that was the last of that memory that I have. Another memory that I have of being there is that I was walking. There was like a kid's like a kid's slide and stuff. It wasn't a kid's slide, but there was like two platforms with horizontal ropes, two horizontal ropes, one about 3 or 4 foot above the other, and they was running horizontally. Well, I was made to go across these ropes, and as I was going across these ropes, I was trying to walk across the bottom rope. And I'm not sure how it all happened, but I had gotten myself screwed up to where I was sitting on the bottom rope, straddling the bottom rope between my legs, and grabbing the bottom rope with my hands to hold on. And I would reach up with my hand to try to grab the top rope, and I couldn't reach it. So I sat there for a minute trying to think of what to do about this situation. And finally, after a couple of minutes, I came to the conclusion that I'd take off my shirt and fling it over the top of the rope and grab it with the other hand and pull that top rope down. And that's what I did. Now, the whole time that I was at Ranger Indoctrination Program, there was somebody always with a manila folder taking notes. Well, after I swung that shirt over the rope and pulled it down with my shirt and grabbed a hold of it, the guy holding the folder said, "This one impresses me." These obstacles that I was being forced to do, they was compensating for my handicap of not having a memory. From obstacle to obstacle, they would have somebody standing at each obstacle, pointing to where I was supposed to go next to the next obstacle. I was running this obstacle course, one obstacle after the next, and they had somebody at each station pointing to the next station. Well, because of every time I did each obstacle, it was like the first time I'd ever seen it. I was doing some of them wrong. So in order to cause me to do them right, that evolved into having somebody standing at each obstacle pointing to me where I was supposed to go, and having somebody else do the obstacle right in front of me to show me how to do it so I could do it correctly. I found out that the way to go across the horizontal ropes was to wrap your arms and legs around the top rope with your back pointing to the ground and pull yourself across that top rope instead of trying to walk across the bottom rope holding the top rope. So they showed me how to do that obstacle as I was coming to it. So that's kind of how I got through that. Another thing that I'd remembered was the platform over the lake. And years later, after I got my memories back, and having been told that I was at Ranger Indoctrination Program, I got on some Ranger videos on YouTube, and there was somebody that identified themselves as a Ranger, and I asked them, "Is there a platform over a lake with a zip line at Ranger Indoctrination Program?" He said, "Yeah, we call that Victory Pond." So this platform over this lake, I remember doing the zip line twice. The first time that I did the zip line, I didn't release it. I didn't remember. For some reason, when you have fighter's eyes, you're not thinking very clearly. So as I was going down this zip line, by the time I realized that I should release the zip line and go into the water, I was coming to the bank. Now that bank, I don't know if the water level was real low that year or if it's ordinarily this low, but the water level below the bank was about 3 feet. There was about a 3-foot bank that I calculated if I released the zip line at the point where I realized I needed to, my trajectory was gonna send me right into that 3-foot bank, and so I knew releasing it at that point wasn't an option. So I just rode it out to the other side and come to an immediate stop and rolled off of it. It hurt, I remember, but it hurt probably a lot less than creaming that bank. So the next time that I did it, I remember doing it another time after that. I walked up to the guy. There was some guys in front of me. I was maybe eight guys or so away from doing the obstacle, and so there was a guy with a manila folder, and I walked up to him and I said, "What's the purpose of this obstacle?" And he said, "To release it as high as you can to prove you're not scared." So when it came to be my turn, I was thinking, I got this. So instead of going down the zip line, I walked up to the edge of the platform, turned around, and done a backflip off the top of that platform. On the way down into the water, just before my feet hit the water, I took a deep breath and went down into the water. I remember going all the way to the bottom of that and my feet touching bottom. And that was one of the first times that I can recall ever being honestly scared with fighter's eyes, because I thought I was going to drown. I was still on my way up, and you know when you take a deep breath and you go underwater and you're like running out of air underwater and you're starting to gasp. Well, that was what was happening to me while I was still underwater, and I was honestly thinking that there was a possibility of me drowning before I made it to the top. But I did make it to the top eventually. But what I can tell you about Victory Pond, having never officially been there, is that is one deep motherfucker. And that platform, from what I've read, is about 80 foot tall. So I did a backflip. So I was not scared enough, fearless enough to do a backflip off an 80-foot platform, having never done diving lessons or anything in the past. I wasn't a diver. I dated a girl that had a swimming pool in her backyard and dove off of her diving board in her pool a few times, but I was never trained in diving and stuff. So I done a backflip off that platform, off an 80-foot platform, and went way deep into some water. The next thing I remember about being there was that we had to walk down this road, and we broke off into two groups. One group was carrying a log, and one group was carrying a gurney. And I guess if you fell behind the group, they would tell you was dead, and you had to get on the gurney, and the other guys would carry you. Well, right off the bat, the other guys were pissed off at me. And the reason was because I couldn't help them on the log. I'm just 5'8". I'm just 5'8" tall, and most of these guys were probably at least 6 foot tall. I was the shortest one there, and when they put it on their shoulders to carry it, my shoulders don't reach that height, so I couldn't get the log on my shoulder to help carry it. Because I was too short, and that pissed them off right from the very beginning. That I couldn't help them on the log, but it is what it was. What it was. Anyway, I just remember them telling me while I was there that if I didn't get my act together, they was going to send me home. And I kept telling them that had the same response every time they said that. And I said, go ahead, send me home. I don't fucking care. I don't even want to be here. I don't even know where here is. But they never sent me home. Instead, I ended up at another place. and I only knew that I was there where I was at because I was on a march with some guys. We was on a hike, kind of on a walk, and it was hot, and we was walking, and I started seeing double, and I told the guy in front of me that I needed to stop because I was seeing double. And so the guy behind me, one of the guys behind me, and there was like 6 or 7 of us, one of the guys behind me said, "Is he faking it?" And I turned around to look at him, and about that time, I hurled all over his boots. The guy that I originally had talked to said, "You can't fake that." And that guy, the guy whose boots I hurled on, said, "I guess not." So we stopped for a little bit, and then before we continued on, somebody asked me later if I was still seeing double, and I was like, "I was seeing double. I was seeing double," and they said "You said you were," and I said, "Well, I'm not now." And then they said, "Well, let's continue on." But before that happened, I asked them where I was at that it was so fucking hot. Because wherever I was at, I knew I wasn't in Oklahoma anymore. I couldn't be. It was too hot. We have 100-degree weather in Oklahoma, but it never gets that hot. And they said we was at North Carolina. Well, looking up the way North Carolina weather is in the summer and stuff, is you have mid 90-degree temperatures with 90% humidity. Is fucking hot. Anyway, so while I was there, one of the things that I remembered during this time was that it was nighttime and we had to go on a navigation course. And there was no way I was going to complete this. I had no memory of anything. I had absolutely no memory at the time because I had fighter's eyes and it was wiping out my memory. In addition to which, I'm not the world's best navigator anyway. But right off the bat, there was several of us, probably 30 or 40 of us would be a pretty good guesstimate. But right off the bat, somebody walked up to me and said they knew a shortcut. I said, "Well, all right." And I just followed him. Well, we ended up in these woods somewhere. And it's the middle of the night. We have no night vision on, no flashlight. We're just in the middle of the dark, getting around on moonlight. And he says to me, "We're lost." So I asked him, I said, "Can you get us out of here then?" He said, "Yeah, I can." And then I got to thinking, and I realized I wasn't the one that got us lost in the woods. I must have been following him. And if he got us lost in the woods, then what's the likelihood in him getting us out? So I said, I got a lighter in my pocket because I was wearing civilian clothes. He was wearing military uniform. I was wearing civilian clothes. And I said, "I got a lighter in my pocket. Do you got a shovel?" He said, "Yeah, I do." So he got out his little garden trowel or whatever, his little shovel, and I had him dig a hole, and I got some leaves and some sticks and put them down in this hole and started a fire. And as this fire was burning, I laid there and went to sleep. I woke up the next morning kind of unexpectedly. Some guy kicked me in the foot, and I opened my eyes, and I'm staring up the barrel of a machine gun. So I'm not sure what's going on. And he told me to get up and be quiet. So I got up and assumed the position. On my knees, hands behind my head, and I was waiting for a moment to attack. I wasn't sure where I was at or why this guy had a gun on me, but I knew if I didn't do something whenever I had the chance to do something, that I probably wouldn't get another. And about that time, he messed up. He got too close. He moved at me with the machine gun pointed at me like this, and the barrel got too close to me. So I grabbed the barrel with my hand, with one hand, and pushed it away from me and come up between his legs with my forearm and racked him between the legs. Then I took this hand that I had racked him with, and then put it down and moved it over and got it behind the trigger guard and grabbed the gun behind the trigger guard and pushed down with my left hand and pulled back with my right hand to spin this gun around in my hand as I jumped to my feet, and then I spun around and then done a back sweep on the guy as I was coming around. By the time I came around, all the way around, I had the gun turned around in my hands, pointing it at him. This woke up the other guy, and he woke up, and he was like, "What's going on?" And so I pulled the trigger on the gun to see if it had any bullets, and a stream of bullets come out, and kicked up some dirt. So I knew it had bullets in it. And honestly, that gun, having never officially shot a machine gun before, I can tell you, when you shoot one of those machine guns, it honestly feels like it would have the Superman effect on somebody. That if it hit them in the chest, the bullets would just bounce off, because the gun seems to have no balls at all. It just doesn't. But anyway, the other guy woke up, so I asked the guy that, and this was probably in retrospect a bad idea, but I asked the guy that had the machine gun on me if he could get us out of the woods, and he said he could. So I had him and the other guy walk in front of me while I had the machine gun pointed at them at their back, and the guy that had the machine gun on me led us out of the woods to a dirt road, and we followed this dirt road all the way to a white shop building. It was a metal building, and it was pure white. It wasn't like gigantic, but it was fairly good size. In Woodward, which a lot of you out there is probably not familiar with my town, but you can probably see it on Google Earth or Google Maps or whatever, if you wanted to see a picture of it. But there's a gym on 22nd Street in Woodward called the Woodward Wellness Center, and in size, and it's also a metal building, except it's cream colored. This other building was pure white. But in size, it was probably about similar in size to the Woodward Wellness Center. In front, it had two glass doors, and they were tinted black, like you would tint your car windows. So we walk in, and those guys walk in, and I walk in behind them with the gun, and one of the other guys that was in there asked, the first thing he asked was, "How did this happen?" And I don't recall that, and then that memory shuts off. That's the last I remember about that memory. But the reason why I said it was probably a bad idea in retrospect to follow that guy out of the woods, probably the last thing you want to do is follow a guy anywhere that had a gun, was formerly pointing a gun at you. That's probably not a good idea, because they're probably going to lead you right back into an ambush or his camp, one or the other. So probably not a good idea. But at the time, whatever, in the circumstances, and it all worked out, I guess. But that's how I passed my nighttime navigation course. It was a fluke. The next thing I remember from there is that, and you got to understand, the memories that I got that I'm telling you about, that this story is coming from, came back to me 15 years ago now. They're not as clear in my head as what they once were, and I replayed them over and over and over and over again, trying to dissect every detail that I could out of them to understand what it was that happened to me. So I remember some of them, what was in the memories, but the rest of them, I can't remember the memories anymore to even pull any new information out. They're not fresh in my mind anymore, like they once were. So anyway, I forget where I was going with that. I got off topic and forgot where I was going with that. But that's how I passed my nighttime navigation course. We'll start back there. The next thing that I remember, I remember where I was going with that, is that I was at this base and there was a guy, and I was talking to him, and some other guy came up and he said something, and I just remember saying to him, how am I supposed to learn anything if I can't remember anything? And he said, that's a good question. He said, teach him the walk and send him home. And so that the other guy worked with me and worked with me and worked with me until I developed a special forces walk. Every time after that I got fighter's eyes, I started walking with a special forces walk. And I've never seen a special forces walk. I have an uncle that was in special forces. In fact, his son told me that his dad was Delta Force. So I don't know if his dad really was Delta Force or not, but my uncle himself told me one time when I was a teenager that down at the VA where he goes, they'd only seen one other guy like him. So he probably was Delta Force, and he was in Vietnam. But anyway, I've never seen a Special Forces walk. I couldn't duplicate one even if I wanted to, but the way I understand it from memories that I've got is other people saying that I was walking with a Special Forces walk while I was walking with a Special Forces walk. So as to what one looks like, couldn't tell you. Other people had told me that knew what one looked like and what one was, said that I was walking with one. But anyway, there was another memory of being either at Ranger Indoctrination Program or at where I think I was at when I did that nighttime navigation course, and they taught me the Special Forces walk, was Special Forces Assessment and Selection, is where I think I was at. But anyway, one of the things that somebody somewhere told me, told another guy, was to not let me do jump training because they didn't think I would remember to open the chute, which was probably a very wise decision, because I wouldn't have. From what I remember, I didn't remember to release the zip line on the way down the zip line. So, yeah, I wouldn't have remembered to open the chute. I would have been like a bug hitting a windshield, except the windshield would have been the ground and I would have been the bug. I would have been splattered all over the place. But anyway, the next thing I remember about being there is that I went on that march or that walk where I was told that I was at North Carolina, and either as part of that walk or another walk, we had to do some rock climbing. Somebody had in their rucksack a grappling hook, and they flung it up there and tested it out to see if they had a good footing with the grappling hook, and they climbed up it. Several other guys went up it before I did, but when you get up to the top, one of the people that made it up there before you reaches their hand down and grabs a hold of your hand and helps pull you up the rest of the way. But I remember doing that. Also, I'd remember doing a 1 mile run. It was really a 2 mile run, but they told me to run a mile. So I was like, well, how far is a mile? So I know how to pace myself. And he said, well, you see this such and such off in the distance, a landmark. I said, yeah. He said, run to that and run back. And I said, okay, I can do that. So I kind of halfway ran and halfway kind of halfway ran. It was more than a jog, but less than full out balls to the wall running. And I kind of did that on the way there, and on the way back about half the way on the way back about half the way, when I had made it about half the way, I hit the accelerator and went balls out for the remainder of the run. And I don't remember exactly what my time was, but I think he said that my time was like 4.5 minutes, I think, on a 2 mile run. But don't quote me on that. I don't know what my actual time was. But I will say, from my boxing class, I was in really good shape at the time. Coach had a drill right at the beginning of every class where he made us he would set the ring bell on a 60-second timer where it would ring every 60 seconds. So the bell would ring and we would do 60 seconds of push-ups. The bell would ring again. We'd roll over and immediately do 60 seconds of sit-up. First, let me start over. I don't know how I started that. First, the bell would ring and we would do 60 seconds of push-ups. Then the bell would ring again and we'd immediately roll over and do 60 seconds of sit-ups. The bell would ring again and we would immediately roll over and do 60 seconds of push-ups. And then the bell would ring again, we would do 60 seconds of sit-ups. We would do this 3 times in a row, a set of push-ups and sit-ups back to back 3 times in a row without any breaks in between. After doing that twice a week for 2 years, I'd gotten into really good shape, and I could knock out probably close to 180 push-ups and 180 sit-ups in under 8 minutes. I mean, I was in exceptional shape. In addition to which, I was a partier in high school, but I also, on the nights that I wasn't partying, I was at home 2 hours each night lifting weights on a weight bench that I had gotten when I was like 13 years old. So from like 15 to 17, I lifted weights for nearly 2 hours a night, every night. For my age, I was pretty buff, pretty ripped for the age that I was. I was bigger than most of the football players, even. But anyway, so the next thing that I remember at that point was that I went before a psychological panel. And there was a young girl, about 19 or 20, and 3 guys, 2 psychologists that grilled me, and another guy who sat there and didn't say anything. And one psychologist was pretty old. He was maybe 65, 70, and the other one was kind of young, maybe in his early 40s. Anyway, it was them 3, and I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but I remember telling them, I said, you guys think you're so smart, but I've got fighter's eyes and I'm dancing circles around you. And the girl said, and the girl that was sitting there said, "Oh my gosh, she is." And I told them, I said, "You guys are pissing me off." And they said, "That's the point." And I said, "Well, if you don't quit, I'm going to walk away." And they just kept on. I don't know for how long they kept on, but the longer that this went on, the madder I got, until finally I got up and started to walk away. I was in a room. It was kind of a small room. It wasn't real small, but it was kind of a small-ish room. Probably about the size, I'm not even going to guesstimate on the size, but it was a smallish room. It was the two psychologists, another guy, and that girl sitting behind the desk that they was sitting behind, and I was sitting on the other side. And then when I got up to walk away, there was two other guys standing by the wall in military uniform. One of them walked over to me and was running his mouth, and I clobbered him, and he went flying and bounced off the wall. The older psychologist, and I knew it was the older psychologist, and this is something that a lot of people would find hard to believe, but I was psychic at the time. I had the ability to. I had a pair of eyes in the back of my head. They're my psychic eyes. I was astral projecting. I literally had a pair of eyes in the back of my head to where I could see behind me as I was with my psychic eyes, as I was looking in front of me with my normal eyes. And my psychic eyes had peripheral vision as well as my normal eyes. And somehow in my brain, the two images were put together into one solitary image to where I had a 360-degree view around me. But anyway, so I know it was the older psychologist that said this. And he said, "You killed him." And I asked, "Am I going to get in trouble for it?" He said, "No." He said, "No." I said, "Well, can I do it?" I said, "I'm still pissed off." No, I said, "I'm still mad. Can I do it again?" And he said, "Would you do it with a knife?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I would." So he had the other guy that was standing by the wall walk over and hand me his knife. And they told him to go get another recruit. Well, another recruit come running in, and then he jumped in the air and as on his way down, put his hands to his side. And he was standing there with his hands to his sides. And I looked straight at him and asked him, plain and simple, I said, are you ready to die?" He said, "Yeah, I am." I said, "Are you sure about that?" He said, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "Pfft," and stabbed him right through the throat. He went down, and the older psychologist said, "He's exactly what we're looking for." The younger psychologist, and I see this through my psychic eyes, who was talking. The younger psychologist said he's got a chip on his shoulder. And for the first time, the other guy that had sat there the whole time and never said nothing that whole time said, "We'll knock it off." And that was what I remember about that. The next thing that I remember was that we was clearing a shoot house. It was a small building, plywood building, and there were other guys with machine guns, and I asked them what we were supposed to do, and they said we were supposed to kill the guys that was inside. So here I am, no machine gun, and they all got machine guns. So they run in, and I run it with their machine guns trained on these guys, and I run in behind. Well, they run in, and I run in behind them, and they got machine guns trained on these guys, and I kind of push through them and go run up to them and do the military kill techniques on them that I knew, and really did kill them. And they started bawling me out for it. So we walked out, and when I got out there, I said, "I just did what you told me to do. You said we were supposed to kill them guys, and that's what I did." What I didn't know, a memory that I had gotten later that happened Well, before I go further into where I was at, let me tell you what happened after that. After that, I remember pacing back and forth, walking back and forth, and another guy walked up to me, and he said, "You disappeared." I said, "Where did I go?" He said, "I don't know, but it happens to us too." And I said, I don't want mean to sound like a dick, but can you leave me alone? I don't want to talk to you right now." And I didn't. I was When I came back home after that, I was doing it again, and Kevin Dixon, my chemistry teacher, I was doing it in front of him, and he said that I was walking it off. And that's basically what I was doing. What was happening was that had so much fear in my heart. I was trying to get rid of that fear energy by pacing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'd walk 10 or 15 feet, turn around, and walk 10 or 15 feet back the other way, just in a continuous cycle, walking, turning around, walking, turning around, walking, and doing it over and over again, trying to work off that fear energy. Well, eventually I did. And he come back over and asked me if we could talk, then that's when the memory cuts off. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing that I remember is that I'm back home. Now, there's a lot of stuff that happened before I went to the military bases, but I'd gotten into a lot of fights before in civilian life at home before I went to these military bases, but anyway, I skipped over a lot of stuff. I'm just telling you the military related stuff that's a part of the memories. But anyway, eventually I left where I was at. I guess I was in North Carolina. That's where they said I was at. That's where I must have been at. And then I came back home. Well, when I got back home, something funny started happening after that. These blue pillars of light around the size of a dinner plate. In America, our dinner plates are about 10 inches in diameter. In Europe, I think they're like 12 inches in diameter. They were a little bit less or bigger around than 12 inches, but it was a little bit bigger around than 10 inches. I'd say about 11 inches around. So if you want to get the scope of this blue pillar of light, I say pillar, it was a pillar. It would drop down from the ceiling, and it would look like a pillar like you would find on a house. One of those circular pillars that you'd find on a house. It looked like a pencil, but bigger around, dropping down from the ceiling. I came to understand years later that is from a Men in Black that I know, that is called, they call that the kaleidoscope. They call that blue pillar of light the kaleidoscope. And it does look like a kaleidoscope. But anyway, that blue pillar of light would drop down from the ceiling, and it would track around a room until it would lock onto me, and then I would disappear. I would reappear on the ship. That blue pillar of light was connected to a UFO. The cool kids call them UAPs today, but they're just rebranded UFOs. And I'd reappear in the interim on this ship. And walking around me would be little gray aliens. I came to understand later those gray aliens are not what people think they are. Those gray aliens are actually demons. They're not aliens, they're demons. But anyway, and I didn't realize that until just a few years ago. But anyway, the process by which they're looking into a room through that blue pillar of light, because that's ultimately how they see into the room to lock their beaming technology onto you to beam you out of the room. They call that process looking through the kaleidoscope. So they'd beam me out of the room. What would happen after that would be that I would be sent to someplace overseas. The UFO would travel to someplace overseas, and the 4 people that had initially been part of my training became part of my squad, my team. There was 5 of us, and always the same 5. And we would just appear in front of a group of people. Sometimes as few as, a dozen, and sometimes as many as a few dozen or more. Each time, at least, we didn't have any weapons. At least I didn't. I don't know if they didn't. And we'd appear in front of a group. The group that we would appear in front of would usually have at least knives on them, and they would pull their knives on them, and we would have to fight them in close quarters. How I got through it was that the first guy that I'd ran up to, I would kick him in the balls, and as he would bend over, I would grab the knife out of his hand, grab it with both hands, jump in the air, and as he's bent over, drive it down into the back of his neck, and then yank it out. And then if it was a knife that had a blade on it, 10 inches long by 4 inches wide, kind of like a machete, I would spin to my left as I was taking a step to my right and swing that knife at the next guy's neck right around here, and watch his head go flying off. That's kind of how I got through a lot of that stuff. And I'm not going to tell you all the kill techniques that I used. I used 2 primarily because I was taught many more. But I was taught 1, 2, 3, 4 by my grandpa. But I only used the 2 that had the highest probability of working. And they did work. But ultimately that happened to me before I graduated high school. I went out of it with fighter's eyes for a period of time. And I remember Kevin Dixon, the chemistry teacher, eventually intervening and taking me to his house and making me live with him until I got rid of those eyes. The next time, that was in the year of 1999 or 2000, because I graduated in May of 2000. The next time that this started happening to me and went out of it with fighter's eyes for a while was in 2003. I had went to college. I'd graduated in year 2000, and in the year 2003, in August, I went to college. While I was in college, I ended up meeting a girl named Stacy Nelson. She was named Stacy Nelson at the time. She is kind of now a minor celebrity for marrying somebody that was a minor celebrity. Her last name now is Felker. Her name's Stacy Felker. On Instagram, she has like 40,000 followers. And she married a country music singer named Evan Felker. And she's been in the media. She's had write-ups on MSN, and People magazine. You can search her out on the internet. She's on there. But anyway, so she some way is related to my boxing coach, and I have no idea exactly how that relationship works out, but she looks a lot like my boxing coach, and I remember her being at one of the fights early on in my fighting career. But anyway, I'm not going to explain everything about that, but needless to say, she knew my eyes and how to trigger them, and she taught all the other girls how to trigger my eyes. So they was triggering my eyes and sleeping with me. And this caused me to go out of it with fighter's eyes for an extended period of time. And at that time, I started dating, I guess, if you could call it that, my history professor, my college history professor. And she kind of turned me into a live-in boyfriend. She was married, and her husband, of course, had something to say about it, and he tried to fight me, but ended up with a broken nose. And another woman, which she wasn't the first one. I had gotten taken to another woman's house. I don't know her name. She was a redheaded woman, and she had a teenage redheaded daughter, and they were both pretty. Anyway, and they had me live over there for a while. I was sleeping in the teenage daughter's bed and taken showers with baths and stuff with her in the morning just before she'd go to school, and me and the mother would fool around while her husband was at work during the day. This woman is an important woman, and I'll tell you why. As this was happening to me, she told me that she had the same eyes that I have, and I tried to trigger her with the 3-word trigger phrase that triggers all fighters, which I'm not going to tell you what that is, but it triggers all fighters. And I tried to trigger her with that, and she knew exactly what I was trying to do, and she said that wasn't her trigger. She also told me that there was a pedophile ring in our community. And her daughter had told me that her mom was part of a psychic program. And her mom had proven to me that she was psychic. And the dean of the college, which professored several of the classes, and was the professor of the class that I met the redheaded woman in, her daughter, and my boxing coach's daughter, I think she was, Stacy, in. And that class was psychology class, and the dean of the college professored that class. And the professor, the dean of the college, always kept saying that she had a psychic friend. It took me many years and many memories to figure out that her psychic friend was the same redheaded woman that had demonstrated psychic abilities to me. But this becomes important. What she told me about the pedophile ring and about the psychic, and her daughter told me about the psychic program. Because I've come to realize that in our community, there is government black projects, special access programs going on in my community that's connected to the deep state. The deep state being the government within the government that's involved with aliens. And this pedophile ring that's operating in this community. See, there's a trauma-based mind control program that's operating in this community that is using sex as the trauma source, and it's operating as a pedophile ring and being utilized as a call girl service to turn out psychics and soldiers for government special access programs, one being a psychic program and one being a soldier program, the two that I know of. That's why the pedophile ring and stuff is important. there's some high-level military shit going on in this community, and I know some of the people connected with it because they was connected with me. One of the things, the memories that I had, was being in Antarctica and being my squad telling me that we was there to retrieve some alien technology, and I just kind of screwed around on the ice while they went and handled the mission, whatever it was, and then they came back, and then we had a snowball fight on the glacier, and then we started sliding around on the ice, and I got the brilliant idea that I would run as fast as I could on this ice, hit my ass, and slide. Well, I did. And that was one of the other times that I remembered truly being scared with fighter's eyes. Because usually with fighter's eyes, I was not especially scared of anything. I was pretty much fearless. And that goes back to the mind control that I experienced when I had fighter's eyes. A good description, a good introduction to this mind control thing would be to watch a movie called Revelation Road. In that movie is depicted mind control. The hero in that movie says that he volunteered for special ops and went through some intensive training, and it shows him with electrodes strapped to his head, goggles put on his eyes, them shooting him up with chemicals, and then telling him that they was using trauma to build a fearless soldier. And every time that he goes out of it into elite soldier mode, he closes his eyes for a brief second and then opens them up. He's going from one state of consciousness to another, or one altar to another, from one altar to another. But anyway, and when you're under mind control, your pupils dilate. They get really big. The 2 years that I had been in boxing, I never once knew what the color of my coach's eyes. I looked him in the eyes twice a week for 2 years, and I never once knew the color of his eyes because his pupils were dilated so bad it blocked out the color of his eyes. He was pure pupils. All you could see was pupils. My eyes started doing the same thing. And when your eyes are like that, you're looking at the world like you've got sunglasses on, even though you don't. Everything has a black tint to it. But anyway, so I'm in college, and this woman tells me about this psychic program, and I'm having a relationship with her and her daughter. And she passed me over to my history professor, who turned me into a live-in boyfriend for a while. And basically, those two women were acting as my handlers. That woman, her daughter, and then my history professor were acting as my handlers. And as I was going through all this, these blue pillars of light were continually dropping down from the ceiling, and I was in and up over in Iraq, fighting in the Iraq War in various missions. One of the missions that I remember being, I remember my orders, part of my orders, somebody saying, these exact words: we're having an operation, we're calling it Red Dawn, your job as Task Force Green is, and that's where the memory cuts off. So I think that I was in Red Dawn, which I had never even heard of Red Dawn until I got that memory back. So, call it what you will. Another memory that I have at the time is another guy telling this woman about me in relation to me that this is CAGS and he doesn't know it. And I didn't know what CAGS was, honestly. So I put in CAGS military in the search engine to find, because CAGS and I knew it was related to the military. That acronym, whatever it was related to the military. I found out something called about Combat Applications Group, which is another term for Delta Force, and Task Force Green is what JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, calls Delta Force and everything. Now, that walk that I was on with the grappling hooks going up a mountain and everything, the psychological panel, the shoot house, all of that is part of Delta Force. The shoot house is a part of operator training course. That's the only part of operator training course that I remember, is that shoot house. The rest of it is the pre OTC stuff. But another thing that's interesting about Delta Force that I'll say is that Delta Force is allowed to wear civilian clothing on missions. They don't have to wear a uniform. And given how I was taken to combat to do missions, a UFO flying overhead, picking me up and flying me overseas, and literally going from over here to over there within like 15 minutes, doing a mission and being back in 45 minutes, tells you the real reason Delta Force is allowed to wear civilian clothing is because they're plucked straight from civilian life by UFO and dropped off into a mission somewhere. So they say Delta Force can wear civilian clothes because, it's better so they can blend in, is what their official line is. But if you're the only guy in civilian clothing around a bunch of military guys in military uniforms, the reality is you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. But that's the reason why I'm pretty sure the Delta Force is allowed to wear civilian clothing on missions, is because the UFO picks them up and they literally go straight from civilian life to a combat mission in minutes. So, take that for what you will. But that's kind of the story that emerged out of the memories that I got back. And I didn't get those memories back until I was 27. And there's a video, it was kind of a documentary. I don't know who put it together, but it was the best kind of explanation of mind control that I've ever found on the internet. I found it on YouTube, and I knew what kind of a gem it was. So I used YouTube DL, a Python module, script, or whatever you call them, to download the video off of YouTube. And I presently have it in my possession on my computer, and I created a DVD and burned it to a DVD. I've not since been able to find it on YouTube, so I don't know if it's just not pulling up in the search for me, or if it got removed off of YouTube. There's a lot of stuff connected to super soldiers that I've noticed that has disappeared from YouTube. One of the things that disappeared off of YouTube early on, 15 years ago, when I got my memories back of being a super soldier, was a guy named Max Spears. And I listened to his story and I was like, whatever. Like I did a lot of the super soldiers, I didn't really believe any of their stories, because they sounded so fanciful and outrageous. But what is interesting about him is that he died under mysterious circumstances. There's a BBC program on his death, actually, still on YouTube, but all the content that he produced, all the interviews and stuff that he produced of his story is gone off of YouTube. There's another guy that talked about the 20 and Back program named Corey Good, which he has since come out and said that he was making it all up. But a lot of the information that he's had on the secret space program and stuff is good information. I honestly don't think he was making it up. I think he was part of the secret space program, but he was pressured into saying that he made it all up. And they've since deleted all of his content off of YouTube to censor the story and keeping the information from getting out there. These people that are behind all of this are trying to get a control of social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all these things, to be able to get rid of people's content, anybody's content, anytime, for any reason that they want, for the purposes of censoring people, to keep certain information and points of view from reaching the public at large. And that's, everybody can see that that's happening. And that's not anything crazy. Another thing I will mention about my soldier memories that makes me different from a lot of super soldiers is they tell you a lot about how badass they were, and they were out fighting space aliens and all that shit. Well, I wasn't out fighting space aliens. I've never been off planet that I can recall. But one of the things they never talk about is the human element to what they did, and how it affected them. Well, let me tell you how the combat affected me. And it caused me a lot of many tears for many years. Basically, the killing that I remember doing didn't bother me. Seeing heads fly off shoulders and stabbing people through the throat and things like that, it didn't really bother me. What bothered me is what happened after that. For instance, one of the memories that I had is that we had done something. What we had just done, I don't know. Me and the 4 people that was my team, we had just done something, and we was marching some soldiers through some dumbass place in Iraq. They were enemy combatants, and we were marching them through the streets, and presumably to get them to an exfiltration point, to where they could be sent to a torture camp for enhanced interrogation. Presumably that's what we were doing. But we was marching them through Baghdad or some dumbass place like that. And there was people all around us. And I instinctively knew not to look at anybody. I didn't want to look at anybody or anything. I was just looking at the ground. But I accidentally looked up and turned my head to my right. And right next to me was a woman. And you couldn't tell she was a woman because she had a hijab or whatever you call those things. She was in full gear, head covered, body covered. All you could see was a pair of eyes, but I could tell from the frame that it was a woman. And a switch flipped in my head, and I knocked her down and asked the female member of my squad that was standing next to me for her knife. And she said, "You don't have to do that. She wants to fuck you." But she handed it to me anyway. And I remember looking down at this woman's eyes, straight into her eyes, and she was looking up at me with these big dilated pupils the size of dinner plates. And she said in plain English, "You're a hero." And So I got my pants down and got her shit up and raped her, which probably to her it wasn't rape. She wanted it, but to me it was rape. After I finished, I took the knife and ran it across her throat. Didn't even look at her as I was doing it. I just ran it across her throat. I don't know if I actually cut her or not, but right after that, I got up, handed the knife back, pulled up my pants, and started to walk off like nothing had happened. And one of the guys that was with me handed me a cigarette and said, "Have one of these, it helps." So I lit it up, took a drag off of it, maybe two. I think it was after the first drag. All that fear that was in my heart just immediately dissipated. It just was gone, and I was back to normal. So that cigarette helps. But that was one thing that you'll never hear any of the other super soldiers talk about, is doing something like that. Another thing that I would do, that I remember doing when I was at home, was when I was fucking some girls. I wasn't actually like fucking them. It was more like I was killing them. I was alternating between wrapping my hands around their throat and choking them and punching them in the stomach. Memories like that is what caused me to drink and cry for so many years. I couldn't forgive myself for beating, raping, and killing women. It hurt me really bad because I grew up to love and respect women, and that is just something you don't do. And then I had memories of doing it. It made me feel really bad, and I drank and cried a lot over that for many years. I kept replaying the memories, the memories that hurt me the most and caused me to want to cry over and over and over and over again. I couldn't really focus on anything because those memories would pop up and I would focus on those memories instead. I came to realize later on that that's a form of PTSD known as intrusive memories. And I came to realize that the beating and the raping and killing of women was another form of PTSD known as combat stress reaction. And the beating, raping, and killing of women was how I was reacting to combat stress. That was the way I reacted to it. So now I understand what it was that I had done and why I did it. And I've come to terms with it. But for many years, I drank and cried and couldn't keep my mind together. I tried to go back to school, to VOTEC, and in one school year, I had to take 3 or 4 leaves of absences because I'd go out of it for a week just drinking and crying and couldn't do anything productive. That's how it ultimately affected my life. I couldn't do anything productive because I couldn't keep my mind together long enough to do anything productive. But this is basically the story that emerged out of the memories that came back years after they happened. And unlike a lot of super soldiers, I know the people that super soldiered me, the people in the military that super soldiered me, and had me sent to the military under my control. And I know at least one member of my squad that had also been part of the 4 people that trained me. And she gave me the identity of another person possibly in the squad named Brian Randolph. She was named Saunnie Thompson, and years after I'd gotten my memories back, like I said earlier, I went to her in United parking lot, which is a grocery store, and asked her about my memories about Fighter's Eyes, and she said she remembered a bunch of girls hovering around her desk. Well, and I remember that too, because another guy that was a fighter himself had turned a lot of those girls in for raping me, that was sleeping with me during my college years. And we all ended up at the Woodward County Jail, and the jail administrator, which was also the woman who trained me and also a member of my squad, she opened up the women's side of the jail cell, and I watched her lead them females back to the women's side of the jail, because it was split off into the men's side and the women's side, and she led them off into the women's side of the jail. But when I cornered her in the grocery store parking lot, she kept asking me why I wanted to know, and I just told her I wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy. So she verified the memory that I already had of those girls being there that day in her office, being led to that jail cell. So I know, and I've had other confirmations and stuff coming out of my memories that lets me know that this is not stuff that I'm making up. And I'm willing to take a lie detector test on this matter. And let me tell you about lie detector tests. They may be inadmissible in a court of law, but I have a friend that's in the Men in Black, and they utilize a lie detector test to determine whether or not you gain entry into that exclusive club. Now let me tell you about the Men in Black. They have what's considered an above top secret security clearance. It's top secret SCI, which SCI stands for sensitive, segmented compartmentalized information. That gives them access to special access program documents. Special access programs are government black projects, and they have the security clearance to read the documents that come out of the black projects. That's why it's considered above top secret. Now, not every special access program involves aliens and alien technology, but every government program that involves aliens and alien technology is a special access program or a black project. So the Men in Black have access to the alien documents, and they also have access to all the alien toys, the human cloning, the shuttles is what they're called, the UFOs, the black DeLorean, the government time machine, things like that. They have access to all of these technologies. Now, most people, they work for the government. They call their black tuxedo uniforms black drags. Most of them, they work under the Department of Homeland Security now. As of 2003, they used to work for the under the Department of the Treasury. They have a title of special agent. Most people know them as Secret Service. And I have a friend that did 5 years in the Secret Service. His name is Clayton Jules Barbier. Clayton, Jules, Joules, Barbier, Barbier. He's on LinkedIn. He's got a LinkedIn resume, and you can see right there on the LinkedIn resume, 4 years, 9 months in the Secret Service. And recently I started getting mind controlled again by a crazy teacher. I went to my Delta Force uncle and told him what was going on, and I asked him how to make the mind control stop. He told me 3 things. He told me never look anyone in the eye. He said put on black sunglasses and buy a watch with hands. The last 2 things was a reference to the Men in Black movies. So clearly my Men in Black friend has been involved. And I hadn't pieced together the Men in Black element because I hadn't thought about him in years. I knew he had been in the Secret Service. When I got my super soldier memories back and told him I was a super soldier, he cut me out of his life. And so I respected his decision and never tried to contact him again. And so he was far removed, and I kept track of him over the years the best that I could. And so I was far removed from his life and contacting him. But as I was getting mind controlled relentlessly by this crazy teacher, it caused me to reach out to him and say, look, I need help. This is what's going on. This is what happened to me. These are the people that was involved. I said, I need help. And so evidently he time traveled to the past and altered some stuff in the past. Because years before that, I was at a family gathering, and my uncle, I went and talked to my Delta Force uncle, not about anything in particular, just because, just to go visit. And he asked me if I'd been drinking my chocolate milk. And I said, well, yes, I have. How did you know? And I don't recall what his response was, but it was like, I was just curious or just wondering or something like that, which was another reference to the Men in Black 3 movie. And we took a family photo, and even though it was summertime, he was the only one wearing big black sunglasses in the photo. And a couple weeks after the family photo was taken, his wife, my aunt, my mom's sister, brought over a picture in a frame of that photo that we took. So he's clearly been meddling around in the past. And I don't know what his game plan is, but and when my uncle told me about getting a watch and putting on black sunglasses, I hadn't contacted my Secret Service friend yet. I was still about 2 or 3 weeks away from doing that, but yet already my uncle was giving me at that period of time and even before, making references and stuff to the Men in Black. So clearly, I don't understand how time travel works exactly, but the past has already happened. So when I was in the past thinking that it was the present, I was living in the past of the current present. The future had to catch up to a certain level to where my friend would time travel to the past and make that happen. So I don't know how this works out concurrently with all of that happening all at one time, to where something can happen in the past, but you've got to get to the future to alter that portion of the past. But regardless, I think my friend's been playing around in time. But this is kind of the story that's emerged out of all this. And another interesting thing about this is our police department, Woodward Police Department, has a online webpage where you can report anonymous tips or file police reports. Every time I file a police report on these people on this incident, and their website reports that the police report has been submitted successfully, when I go back and check with the police department about that police report, they say that they never got it. So evidently, when it involves certain people, our police department can't seem to keep track of its police reports. Strange but true. I'm sure the FBI would like to know that our police department has a hard time keeping track of its police reports, especially when they involve certain people. But anyway, this is the story that emerged out of the memories that I got back. Take it for what you will. I witnessed some secret space program technology, and I'm reading a series of books by Dr. Michael Salla on the secret space program. That's Michael, Salla. You can find his books on Amazon. They're really good books. There's a series of 9 of them, and I've read most of 3 of them. The one on the one about Antarctica, the one about the Navy secret space program, and the one about the Air Force secret space program. I've read most of all 3 of those, and they're really good books. They've got a lot of government documents and a lot of stuff to back up what the claims that's in the books, and they're in the books as you're reading what's going as you're reading. They'll put on a page the document. They'll reference something out of the document and then put the document in a figure on the next page, so you can read the document itself where they pulled that information from. So anyway, but I was a witness to some secret space program technology, UFOs, blue pillars of light. I've even seen human clones. I've never seen them in the vats because evidently they're incubated in artificial wombs. But I've never seen them in the vat of liquid. I've just seen the after effects, like five guys standing in front of you that all look identical. I've seen that. So I've witnessed some secret space program stuff, and I've seen gray aliens. And another thing about the gray aliens that made me realize that they're demons is something that I didn't put together until I became a Christian a few years ago. And what that was that when I got involved with this, when I was 18 in high school, there was a guy sitting on a table behind a table on a UFO, big long table, and he was the only guy sitting behind it, and I was on the other side of it, and he was sitting there, and he said that I could make a deal for anything that I wanted, and he turned around and pointed at the gray aliens walking around behind him. He said, the deal is not with me, it's with them. So it got me to wondering, a few years ago, what is gray aliens doing making a deal with James Hein? And it didn't make sense really until I realized that they were demons when I became a Christian. I realized what that deal was. It was a demon pact as part of a Faustian bargain. I made a deal with demons, or made a deal with the devil. And that's another thing that my Men in Black friend told me. He said that I had gotten soul sucked by a silverfish known as Lucifer in the intelligence community, and that silverfish are ass eaters. They latch on to people like suckerfish and ass eat them. Another thing from my insider information is that I can tell you a little bit of terminology from the pedophile guild. And a 40-year-old guy that's sleeping with a high school girl will refer to that girl as his girlfriend in high school. She may be in high school, but he's not. It's the other way around for an older woman with a high school boyfriend. She'll say that he was her boyfriend in high school. He may be in high school, but she's not. And another thing these people do is take possession of these kids and sell them out, as what it was described as to me. But anyway, take all this information for what you will. Believe me or don't believe me, it's up to you. I'm just giving you my story. Naturally, with other super soldiers and stuff, I was reluctant to believe their stories because they was sounded like fantasy to me. especially a lot of the James Rink Supersoldier clan and everything. Their claims seemed pretty outrageous and outlandish, and it just, I mean, anyway, I don't know. I just didn't believe most of the Supersoldier stories that I heard. So you can believe mine if you want. If you don't, it's up. You know, it doesn't matter to me. Um, I'm just giving my story. I'm willing to take a lie detector test on the validity of my story. After listening to my story, you can have me take a lie detector test on any element I've said of it, and if it's good enough to, if the results of a lie detector test is good enough to get into is good enough to either exclude you or deny you out of an exclusive club like the Secret Service, which there's only 6,500 Secret Service agents in the entire country. If it's good enough for the Secret Service, then it should be good enough for everybody else, even though they're inadmissible in court. They're good enough for the Secret Service. So if you fail the lie detector test for the Secret Service, you don't get in the Secret Service. So if the results are good enough for the Secret Service, they should be good enough for everybody else, to be honest with you. And I'm willing to take a lie detector test on any and all things that I've said here tonight. And it is tonight for me. Well, it's morning now. For me, it's 12:17 a.m. But anyway, that's my story. Believe it or don't believe it, but that's the story that emerged from the memories that came back years later after they happened. Anyway, my name is James Hein. I live in Woodward, Oklahoma. There's no need for you to try to dox me because I just doxed myself. The people involved, my chemistry teacher is named Kevin Dixon. He lives in Woodward, Oklahoma. My boxing coach was Raymond Johnson. He lives in Shattuck, Oklahoma. The member of my squad that also helped train me was Saunnie Thompson. She lives right down the road from Kevin Dixon out on H Street Estates in Woodward, Oklahoma. And she gave me the name of Brian Randolph whenever I talked to her over the phone a few years ago, and he works, or did a couple of years ago anyway, at the Enid County Courthouse in Enid, Oklahoma, running security. And the other two people that were involved in this was Sandy Washman and her husband, and both of them have since passed away. But the other ones are very much alive. So anyway, that is all of the people. And Saunnie, from what I understand, was in the military. Kevin was in the military. Ray was in the military. Sandy was a military brat, and her husband was military. So this is all the, and my uncle Melton Farmer, he was special forces, and his son told me he was in Delta Force. So I was surrounded by military and pissed off a bunch of military when I said fighters were better than military guys. In addition to which, I was a pretty good fighter. I wasn't good in so much as what I knew, but I was really fast and had really good defense. At the time, my coach's hope of producing a pro. I was going to be his prize fighter if I would have just stuck around. He wanted me to go pro because I was so fast, I could hit so hard, and I had such good defense. He wanted me to go pro, but I never stuck with it and quit and never went pro. But and I have a boxing trophy to prove I was in boxing. I still have my hand wraps. Anyway, I have an old photograph of me from my senior pick from that time period to show what I look like at that time period. I mean, I don't know. Make of it what you will. Believe it or don't believe it, but that's the story. Anyway, thank you for listening to me.